Welcome to Love and Leadership, the podcast that helps you lead with both your head and your heart, plus a bit of humor. I'm Kristen Sharkey, a leadership coach and facilitator.
And I'm Mike Sharkey, a senior living and hospitality executive. We're a couple of leadership nerds who also happen to be a couple.
Join us each week as we share our unfiltered opinions, break down influential books, and interview inspiring guests.
Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, we're here to help you level up your leadership game and amplify your impact.
Hello and welcome back to Love and Leadership. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
Why is there a question mark?
Well, there wasn't a question mark, but good observation of tonal usage after last week's never split the difference conversation. I actually re-recorded my new voicemail and made sure at the end my tone went down.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a real power move.
It's such a power move.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, today is a topic-based episode. We're talking about receiving feedback as a leader. But first, it's been a minute since we did leadership moments, since we haven't had any of these episodes in a bit. What would you like to share, Mike?
Well, I've had some leadership moments. I probably can't say too much for legal reasons, but
Yeah,
I'm definitely a people pleaser. I like to be liked. I don't like to make waves. And in leadership roles, you can't lead with that, right? You have to lead with the success of the endeavor, the mission, and to judge leaders from the outside and say, oh, I could do better, or I don't like the way this guy. Until you sit in the chair, you don't know the full scope of pressures, demands, responsibilities, concerns that you will face. Long story short, well, that's never true with me. But long story short, I had a situation that demanded a more aggressive approach and a firmer hand for the good of the mission. And I probably didn't make some friends in the process. And that's super uncomfortable for me, but we'll take that as a little bit of character growth as well. And I definitely had more than a few moments of, as Brene Brown said, of rumbling with emotion and vulnerability. And I didn't like any of it. I don't like any of it. I also don't like receiving feedback. Positive or negative. I'm always gonna try and do better. But it should be interesting. All right, let's do this. All right, your turn.
I just have something I'm excited about. I'm interpreting leadership moments very broadly these days, I feel like, but I am doing a talk in Houston next week as part of a Disrupt HR event. If you're in the HR world, you've probably heard of them, but if not, it's like the TEDx of HR. Basically, they do them in cities across the world. And I'm doing a talk on improverbs. So basically,
improverbs. Oh, I got it.
Improv principles applied to leadership.
Cute.
Yeah, like instead of proverbs, it's improverbs. And it's a 5-minute talk, which is much shorter than, it's actually like a fun speaking challenge because your slides change every 15 seconds. And it's only 5 minutes. So usually when I'm doing talks, it's 20 minutes or 45 minutes. So it's kind of a fun challenge, but I'm excited I love talking about improv and leadership, obviously. So
you're going to Houston?
Yeah, you might be making an appearance in Houston at some point that week.
That's right. I remember booking some travel.
As well. Mike's dad also lives outside of Houston, so we'll be combining with a little bit of a trip.
I mean, he's in the boonies.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's realized his dream of being as far from civilization as possible before you start headed back, and I share that dream for sure. I like people and I like to see them, but I like to be able to retreat to my ranch that's 30 miles from the nearest person. That's the dream. I think in Colorado is a good spot for that. Yeah.
30 miles is very far. There's no Whole Foods delivery.
Well, I mean, there might be. I don't know. They deliver everywhere.
No, they don't.
They don't?
No, they don't.
Well, we'll rough it.
I've been in spent a month in something that's pretty out of nowhere, and even Amazon deliveries are slower.
Yeah, I remember
the ultimate first world problem.
Yeah, when we honeymooned in the Maldives, I remember I was trying to get some Amazon package shipped, and I was ordering like 3 weeks in advance, and it wasn't enough.
Nope. Nope.
And I was like, "There's no Prime now.
There is no.
There's Prime next month. You know, for the Maldives."
Yeah,
which is good. I don't. You know, we definitely have a consumer culture, and I'm very guilty of like. Not like you, though. Whenever I go to the hub, it's like when I punch in your code, it's you have 19 packages.
That's an exaggeration.
Of course, it's an exaggeration, but the question is, how much of an exaggeration?
Yeah.
Only one order of magnitude.
It's not okay. Whatever. Mm-hmm. I guess we'll get back on topic.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna get some feedback.
You're about to get some. You're about to get some feedback.
I'm gonna get some negative feedback.
Okay. Well,
goodness gracious.
So this episode. So we did an episode a little while back on giving feedback as a leader, and this is kind of like the follow up to that on receiving feedback. And this has come up in a few places, but I think particularly in What Got You Here Won't Get You There. He talks a lot about how feedback is so important for leaders. There's like a Zinger-Folkman study I'll link to that in the show notes that shows that leaders who ask for feedback are perceived more positively. But it also really helps, like actually actively soliciting feedback as a leader and making sure you're getting it really helps set an example for your team and helps you create a culture of feedback as well, because you really have to set that example and continuously do it. So it's important. With that said, most of us hate it. So if you hate receiving feedback, you are not alone. So you can know that going in.
I worked one place, they had like a set of 15 maxims, and one of them was feedback is a gift. And I'm like, okay, sure. It certainly is, but nobody wants to hear all the ways they're coming up short. Sometimes it's not coming up short too. It's just like an adjustment. You have to feel pretty secure in your value and your own stuff and be willing to listen.
Yep. So today we're going to talk about one of a series of steps and stuff you can do to help yourself through the process, but starting with like how you're getting the feedback. So Marshall Goldsmith in What Got You Here Won't Get You There breaks it down into 3 categories. You have solicited feedback. So this is all about asking the right people the right questions, interpreting the answers properly, and then accepting them as accurate. So this is always better to get confidentially, right? Like through the 360 feedback, but it's also something that if you're building up this feedback culture, you can also get it by asking people directly and creating an environment where it's like safe for people to give feedback, right? His question is, how can I do better? We'll talk about a couple other options too. And then there's unsolicited feedback. So this is where somebody just gives you feedback openly. And often this will help open your eyes to things that you weren't necessarily aware of. And then there's observational feedback. So this is you making observations and using them as clues about how people feel about you, which is going to be less accurate than people giving you feedback directly, but can still be really valuable because we're always observing, right?
So I think it's interesting. Some of this is cultural, right? I worked for a while in a Chinese restaurant where I didn't know anything, but thought I did. And they very graciously would correct me. And of course, I did not like that, but their culture is different. They actually think and they are, in fact, and now I know they actually did me the greatest favors that I did not deserve and did not appreciate at the time. They have a culture of cultivation and self-improvement over thousands and thousands of years. And if someone is correcting you, you're supposed to appreciate it because that person is spending their vital time and energy to help you get better. And even if they're not like 100% on the money, there's probably some learning experience for you. So That was a real like culture shock for me, but I try and listen now. I don't know, but I certainly didn't appreciate it then. I do now. And honestly, I can never repay that kindness. It is a kindness. I don't fully agree that observational feedback is less accurate. It's different, but people don't always verbalize the truth either when you ask them. And as somebody who's, maybe it's because I'm hyper aware of people's facial expressions and emotions, and that is probably not healthy, but as you wrote this, I'm from observational feedback.
Yeah. I mean, it's an important part of it. I think that he doesn't say it's not, like, because it's the most frequent feedback you're getting because you can always be observing situations.
Well, and aren't there some conflicting like studies of the efficacy of 360-degree feedback? And I think you have to, I'm from a world of surveys, right? We survey every customer, we survey our residents, everyone it's definitely valuable information, but people have their own agendas too.
Yeah. I mean, my experience, I'd have to look up specific studies, but my experience is that 360s are incredibly valuable, but the format that they're done in matters a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think survey-based 360 feedback can be informational, but there's also a certain degree of like anonymity within it with like commentary too, that I've seen people say things that they would like never say to another human, that they'll put it in like the anonymous comments.
Oh, sure they will.
Of a 360 feedback review, right?
Well, I think it's valuable. And I always, like, when you do a resume and you put your references, it's usually people that were your boss. And I think I want to also, I've asked people who were on my team to be a reference, like, because they're the ones that are going to tell your prospective boss how you treat your team. A lot of people lead up the chain of command and they work very hard to be impressive to their leadership, to their bosses, but they step all over the people that are below them. Mm-hmm. So I want to call your line cook. Like, how did you treat your dishwasher? Like,
Yeah.
So
I mean, they're still very valuable. I think they can be harder. If you're sensitive to feedback, I think they can be harder to take in. It also depends on the survey and how it's done and how it's debriefed and all that. But
yeah, that makes sense. The phrase, not the phrasing, but the format has to probably be very intelligently designed.
Yeah. But I mean, there's also like the flip side of that, which is asking people for feedback directly, which is also like optimal for you to have working relationships in an environment and culture where that's like considered safe and acceptable. But you're never going to get, with most people, there are some people who are very transparent, but with most people, you're not going to get as direct feedback as you would through another format. So my preferred way to do 360s, this is like how any coaching engagement I do defaults to, unless they have like an internal mandated 360 process for the company, is a verbal 360. So as a coach, I will, like at the beginning of a coaching engagement, I will ask them for a list of people they work with across different levels. So you have direct reports, you have peers, you have stakeholders, supervisor, etc. And I will interview them, and then I can ask follow-up questions and get clarification, and then aggregate that into like a feedback report. That's my favorite way to do it, because you still have the accountability of they're talking to me. So like you don't get quite the level of harshness that you can get from like a 360 with the anonymous comments.
It can be pretty harsh.
Yeah, but you're going to get a lot more honesty than with a lot of people than you would like asking them for feedback on yourself, right? So for me, it like strikes that middle really well.
Yeah, like that you're aggregating it and interpreting a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I include like direct quotes as much as possible with it, unless it like reveals who the person is. It's anonymized within an aggregated format, but I break it down into different categories and stuff for them. So, and then we debrief it together. I don't just like send it to them. So I do send it to them, but after we've looked through it together.
I don't know. I guess some of it should make you just a little bit uncomfortable, right? We did something where like for learning and growth, you have to be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I was definitely a little bit uncomfortable today. I hate it, though.
I know.
I hate it.
Well, it's discomfort for a reason, right?
Still hate it. Like,
yeah, you're still allowed to not enjoy it. It's allowed. But it also gets easier over time, right? Like you can handle it a lot better than you could like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, probably.
Maybe. I don't know.
I think you can.
I just, I had some advice from probably when I was working in that restaurant too. So I remember I think like a child telling me I was doing something wrong and I didn't want to listen. I was like, you're a little kid. And then somebody gave me some overarching advice that when somebody tells you something, you should try and remove where it's coming from or who it's coming from, the tone of voice, their intention, and just try and get the message from the universe. And if you can do that, like you'll find value in lots of different places that might instead make you have an emotional reaction. I'm not saying I can do that, but I definitely want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about mindsets and stuff to help with that. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know I love a Harvard Business Review article. So I do have one I'll link to in the show notes. It's about how leaders can get the feedback they need to grow by Kim Scott, who's the author of Radical Candor, which I would like to do in our LBC one of these days.
My heart's just like palpitating. That book.
Liz Fosslien and Molly West Duffy. But there's a couple things I really liked from this article. I think the one thing is they recommend that you have a go-to question for asking for feedback, and it's something that sounds like it's in your own words. So they gave a couple of examples of like, what can I do to support you? What could I do or stop doing that would make it easier for you to work with me? Or there's
that's some structure. Not like, do you like me?
Yeah, yeah. And there's also like Marshall Goldsmith's classic question, how can I do better? You'll note that just like we were talking about with negotiation in last week's episode, and also like we talked about with the coaching habit and has come up, open-ended questions are the key here. So like questions starting with what or how. As opposed to, do you have any feedback for me? In which case it's very easy to be like, nope, everything's good.
Or you're terrible. I had a leader who asked for feedback, but she had not really established herself in the position. She was very new to leadership, and she asked a very adversarial team who she had just inherited, what do you think of me? Oof. Or like, how am I doing? Or just a very, and she got like, a scathing New York Times critic book review or something on her, not productive at all. And I'm not a big fan of like power in positions, but like if you haven't established yourself as, in your role, and then you're like, it was very insecure in a way. And it wasn't like, it wasn't meant to be.
Like, what do you like me?
Do you like me? Or like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please tell me what I'm doing wrong. You can say that to some degree when you have a foundation of competence, when you carry yourself with enough leadership presence, like that will get you leadership points, if you will. But saying, how do I do my job is not hot. It's not the best.
No, I like these, like making it more focused on what can I do differently or what can I do better? What's one thing I can do? Like these are ways that make it a lot easier to answer the question. So I like that. The other thing I love in this article, so I guess Liz Fosslien, if I'm pronouncing that right, is an illustrator, and she has an illustration in this article that's basically types of feedback people give as types of cookies.
What?
Which is hilarious.
I like cookies.
This is hilarious.
Wait, what? I saw that on your, okay.
Yeah. So there's the Oreo, which is the classic feedback sandwich. So like 2 positive thoughts around 1 negative thought. And then there's the macaron, which is 2 elegantly worded positive thoughts around 1 very tiny negative thought. Black and white, which is like the no nonsense, straightforward feedback.
Yeah. The New York cookie. That's the New York cookie.
Yeah.
That's the cookie they sell in every deli in New York City.
So I guess that's on brand for New Yorkers as well. Yeah. The oatmeal raisin, which is positive with bits of negative sprinkled in.
Jeez, this is amazing.
It's so good.
This is so good. It's so cute.
The sugar cookie, which is overly sweet and ultimately unfulfilling.
If there's enough sugar, it's fulfilling, Miss Fosslien. I've got some feedback for you.
Feedback. I don't know. You're like, it's just like overly sugary feedback.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't actually have any substance to it or doesn't help you.
Like we said, you should feel it. You want to moderate the distress, right? You want to feel just enough uncomfortable to want to improve, but not enough uncomfortable that it like long-term damages your self-worth or self-esteem or your confidence. It's all the right amount, right?
Yep.
And then I see dough.
Dough is the last one, like raw and unfiltered.
Yeah, and there's a rolling pin on it. Like we're going to just flatten you out. And we're going to smack you with the rolling pin.
I love this. I love this so much. So you can think about what kind of cookie of feedback am I tending to give people?
Interesting, because we've talked about the Oreo kind of not. That's a little bit of a traditional thing that we've read about in the 1 Minute Manager. And it might not be the most productive. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a very outdated form of
it may be outdated.
feedback.
And I think some of this depends on the trust you've built long term with the team. I don't know. I probably give them macaron because and then somebody, I don't want them to even know I've said anything.
Yeah. So that's less helpful though.
I don't know. Maybe.
Because then they have to be listening for that one little negative.
Pay attention.
But people are always going to be more sensitive to the negative. So I feel like it's almost like deceiving to try to just minimalize it and hide it in there as opposed to just being direct about it, but also balancing it with positive feedback.
Well, that's the black and white. There's black and white. It should be balanced, right?
Yeah. I mean, we went into this more in the delivering feedback episode about like how to actually give feedback effectively. But I just really like this way of categorizing feedback. It's very, and it's also just
maybe oatmeal raisin is good. Maybe oatmeal, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't want to have too much sugar, but
you don't have too much sugar, no.
Oatmeal's pretty substantive. Good oatmeal raisin cookie.
Well, something to reflect on.
Where's the cranberry cookie? That's the new thing.
Oh,
this is
I do like a cranberry white chocolate chip macadamia nut cookie, we'll say.
Oh, that is my favorite, actually.
And now we're hungry.
No, I just had dinner.
Well, now I'm hungry.
Well, I'll make you gnocchi.
Oh, okay.
I made homemade gnocchi for you. First time in 6 years.
It's delicious.
It came out pretty good.
I bought a bunch of potatoes and he's like, I'll make gnocchi.
Yeah. Well, when you bring me ingredients, they become dishes.
Yep.
You didn't know that I had the gnocchi kung fu, and I make them really crispy.
Yes, they're delicious.
Yeah. She's getting hungrier.
So the last piece of this that I wanted to go through is one of my models, and this is basically for things to follow while you're actually receiving feedback. So this can be true for solicited feedback or unsolicited feedback. But when you're actually in the place of somebody's giving you feedback, how do you take that in and how do you respond to that? And I do have an infographic that goes with this. So if you want to see, if you're a visual person like me and you want to see the actual graphic, you can get a PDF of it. It's at llpod.link/feedback, or I'll put the link in the show notes as well. But basically there's 9 different steps as part of this. So the first is awareness. And this really comes down to observing your emotional reactions to the feedback and recognize that for most people, receiving constructive feedback is going to put you in a fight or flight state. So really just observing your body, what feelings are going through and trying. And this is where having some kind of mindfulness practice where you're learning to observe your thoughts and feelings without letting them necessarily activate you and take over, just letting them exist, is really valuable for many things in general with just self-regulation. But that's kind of the foundation of this, right? Is just notice as a person's giving you feedback, notice what you're feeling and try not to judge it, because it's very normal to be feeling negative emotions or be in a fight or flight stage. And then regulation is the next part of that. So do your absolute best not to show any defensiveness, anger, blame shifting, etc. So try to just take the feedback in and try to take it in before even responding. So watch out for that kind of behavior and really work on regulating it. And then curiosity. So doing your best to dial down your inner judge, which will be definitely activated for most people when you're getting constructive feedback. But doing your best to dial that down and just try to approach the feedback from a place of curiosity. So again, like curiosity, I define as interest without agenda. So trying to separate your emotions and what this feedback means for you as much as you can. This gets easier with practice, but it's hard. It's hard. But once you know it's like what's going to happen, right? What your reactions are going to be, and it gets a little easier. But trying to approach them this place of curiosity. So set a goal of just understanding their point of view and what they're trying to communicate. And then you can apply that to yourself and what it means for you later.
I had somebody very wise tell me once, just let your heart listen.
I like that.
Yeah. And I liked Rebecca's Miss Yang. She had observed that she has a reaction and she has a procedure for herself where she doesn't react and she says something like, "Thank you for feeling safe enough to give me this feedback. I would request some time so I can process it." And I too have found like I'll just try and listen and not get super involved. And I love the way you describe curiosity, which is listening without agenda. Is that what you said?
Interest without
agenda, and then maybe take some time or a day or two, and you'll just sort of have a natural process where you'll have some inspiration and introspection on it. And
try your best to just be in the moment and push the processing to later when you're not like physically with the person.
Yeah, let yourself process it in a natural way where you're not necessarily super involved in it. I don't know if that makes sense. But there needs to be a certain like detachment, and then it's almost natural.
Yeah.
It'll almost happen naturally.
Yep.
If you're open to it. Is that the...
Yeah. Well, you already said the L word, listening.
Wait, what? Sorry.
My God.
On occasion, I've got some feedback that I'm a bit of a smartass.
Just a little bit.
I've tried to tone it down. That's a defense mechanism.
I also am. So,
You are. You certainly are. Oh my God, you are.
It's one of many reasons why we're married.
Oh my God. I don't know about that.
Wow.
I love you so much. I've had a long day. I'm sorry. I'm a little punchy.
Yeah. When we don't record these on the weekends, we're a little punchier when we do.
Yeah, I was on the road for almost 3 hours today. That was a lot.
Yeah.
It's rough.
So listening. So a lot of this is like really practicing what I call immersive listening. So this is not listening to respond. You're actually listening to understand what the person is saying. So not planning out your response, like actually focusing in the moment, like paying attention to their body language, their tone, and really just trying to understand like what is their point of view and take yourself out of it as much as possible in the moment. And then appreciation. So like always thank somebody for giving you feedback, even if you don't agree with it. but recognize the fact that people, I think we said this in the last episode, there's research shows that like people hate giving feedback, I think even more than people hate receiving constructive feedback. So giving constructive feedback. So recognize that it's, for most people, it's taken a lot for them to actually, even if you don't necessarily feel that in the moment.
That's a good point, right? You remember the person. Most people are not psychopaths or narcissists. Yeah. Most people are not, and they don't enjoy saying things like, "You're fired." That takes a special type of person to enjoy.
Presidential leader. Wait.
Well, we're not political.
No political.
To enjoy inflicting discomfort or pain or sadness on somebody else. Like, why would, like, you can say like, "Oh, they're not up to snuff. I'm actually helping them get better." Yeah, you are maybe, but you're doing it for, I don't know why you're doing it. It gives you pleasure to see other people in pain. Not a great trait for a leader. It should be hard for you to break somebody's spirit, or that shouldn't be an easy choice. That should rack you with some type of regret or guilt, or that's
for sure,
right? Like,
yeah. Yep. So the next one is clarity. So once the person has given you the initial feedback, paraphrasing and repeating back what they've said and asking questions to further clarify the feedback. So make sure you really understand what is the feedback. You can ask them to put it in an SBI model. Again, SBI is situation, behavior, impact. So if you don't feel like you have the context for the behavior, you don't understand what the specific behavior was, or you don't understand like why this is important, like clarify. Make sure you understand all of that and like what the other person's perspective is. And then accountability. So taking responsibility for any role that you've played in the situation or any behavior that you've taken and is really important as part of this process. This is, again, this is the opposite of defensiveness, which is what we tend to default to in these situations, right? Because it's a fight or flight type of response.
Well, you don't have to. You can just sit there.
Yep.
You don't owe anyone a response at that moment. You can just politely listen.
Yep.
And I think the world would be a better place just in general. Like you can watch online as somebody makes a comment you don't agree with and not engage with them on Facebook or Instagram. That is absolutely your option. And you can just listen to somebody give you feedback and just say, thank you. Let me think about that. And that's not, it doesn't demean you as a person to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's important to note too. These steps do not need to happen all in the same meeting. In fact, they probably shouldn't, right? Because you should take some time. You don't need to necessarily take accountability until you've had some time to process it. But the thanking, I would always thank the person in the moment. But you can then take some time to reflect on it and then follow up.
That was in Brené's book too. She said she will agree, and I definitely found after I read her, I do this. You agree very quickly and go, yep, got it, heard, working on it, got it. And you're really not truly internalizing you're just like, that's a kind of a deflection. You're not fighting per se, but you're minimizing the feedback by.
Yeah. And kind of like knowing yourself, like if there's any tips or like things you can do to trick yourself to staying in the moment. I know for me, taking notes while somebody's giving me feedback helps a lot. Because for one thing, it helps me actually remember what they're saying, but it also keeps me focused in the present moment. And it's harder for me to start having an emotional reaction when I'm like busy listening and writing things down and then asking clarifying questions that may or may not work for you, but just knowing what you know about yourself, you can use tricks to help yourself stay in the moment too.
Yeah. Find something that works for you to keep you calm.
Yep.
And
so then the last two steps of this, which again, these can and probably should happen later after you've done some emotional processing and really reflected on their feedback and what that means and what, if anything, you want to change. But the next step is action. So follow up with them, really like outline the actions that you plan to take as a result of it. If you're not planning on taking any actions as a result of that, it's good to communicate that and why, right? Because sometimes people will have feedback that you just, for whatever reason, there's leadership reasons for why that decision was made and you can't change it, but at least explaining why that is, since that person took the time and went through the process of giving you feedback, right? And then providing them with updates, like following up is great, asking them for additional feedback. So saying like, hey, like I implemented this change, like how is this working? Like what would you want to see more of or less of, et cetera. But that follow-up process, I think, is usually skipped, and it's actually really valuable. So, yeah. So that's my feedback model. Again, you can grab it in the show notes if you want to just get like a PDF of it. But this is like the counterpart to.
I took both these graphics and set an Asana task for myself sometime in April to go through the Harvard Business Review and craft some questions for my current team.
I love it.
Yeah. I feel like you need to like establish yourself a little bit before you solicit that type of feedback. You got to let people get to know you a little bit and get through the early stages.
If it's too early, it's,
Yeah, you're going to get maybe not helpful results. And I think we'll clarify this more too with when we do the first 90 days.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Well, great minds.
So, which will be our next LBC in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, look out for that. Talk all about it, which is perfect timing as Mike has just started a new job. So
bum bum bum. I mean, I've already been there 90 weeks at this point. Like
it's like 1 month. That
nobody can believe I've only been there a month. It's literally a month. Not yet, and it does not feel like that. A lot has happened. There's a lot of big projects happening, and the first 90 days definitely I internalized a lot of it. It's super helpful, and
I love this book. I'm excited.
It's a great book. You can impress people by how quickly you can start making impact, and you can really set yourself apart from other people who have I don't say a longer learning curve, and it certainly helps when you're going from the same job in different organizations, like a lateral, when you've done the same job like 5 times, the hot buttons, if you will, the things to look for, but it still can amp up how quickly you take command, as one of the chapters in It's Your Ship, take command. Cool. Looking forward to it. I like your model. I like the cookies.
Yeah, I know. I love the cookies.
Which is best though, like what hit you on the head with I had a leader that did that, and she basically said, I don't bother with any decorum or delicacy. I just smack people with a rolling pin because it just gets results quicker.
Yeah.
And she may or may not have had some other stuff going on in there. But
I mean, I would say, so our delivering feedback episode, I have my model for that in there. So that I like that kind of encompasses my opinions, whether or not you agree with them. But
yours is an analytical and thoughtful approach, which is what I would expect from an analytical archetype.
But yeah, these are much. I mean, I don't know that any of these cookies are actually the right way to do it.
Yeah, that's what she doesn't say.
Yeah, I think there's really but this is, you're likely to get feedback, to receive feedback in one of these ways. So it's good to be aware of
what type of cookie are you feeding me? I kind of feel like the black and white and the oatmeal are probably the most productive. No nonsense. Treat people like adults. Do it without an agenda or without an intention to the intention should be to help people. And if you do that, you can probably be direct with people. And the oatmeal raisin is people respond to positivity. At some point we really need to do how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
That stuff works. When you can give people, when they know that you're on their side and that you want them to win and you support them and you're going to help them grow, they'll take feedback.
Yeah. It's true.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's it.
L&L out.
L&L out. Is that our sign off now?
I don't know. I thought we were loving leadership and cats. We have not had a cat appearance.
I know. It's been a while since we had a cat appearance in our podcast.
They're over it. They're very mercurial.
Now they're like, whatever. You want us to.
Yeah, we want them to.
So we won't, classic.
Well, you know what? We locked them in the bedroom once and they haven't returned.
That's true.
They're protesting.
But that was only after, because for interviews, we use a webcam. And then the previous interview, Beezus literally knocked over the webcam.
Well, and we're interviewing some high-powered people, chief people officer for big companies. We don't want Beezus's tuchus in their I think they'd like it, but I don't know. We want to be professional, so
yeah. So only for interviews do they, specifically her, get locked in the bedroom. But now she's mercurial, as you said. All right. Well,
okay,
we're going to wrap there. Thank you guys so much for listening. Take care of yourselves. There's a lot going on in the world. Remember, self-care is part of leadership as well. And we will see you guys next week with a new interview.
Thank you, everyone.
The Love and Leadership podcast is produced and co-hosted by me, Kristen Sharkey, and co-hosted by Mike Sharkey. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We can't stress enough just how much these reviews help. You can follow us on LinkedIn under Kristen Sharkey and Michael Sharkey, and on Instagram as Love Leader Pod. You can also find more information on our website, loveandleadershippod.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.